So like Ken mentioned, I'm Arturo Martinez with EXP. I'm a project manager, background civil engineer, and I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves. So we'll go down the line here.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Tracy Hayes. I serve as the Deputy Director for Planning, Urban Design, Watershed Management, and Hazard Mitigation. I am with the City of Birmingham.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nancy Mateo. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a commissioner with the City of Coral Springs.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Michelle Wiseman. I am the Director of Waste Diversion and Outreach for the City of Atlanta, Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, the Resilience Division.
I think I have my own. My name is Eric Woods. I'm the Deputy Chief of the Inspection Division for the City of Atlanta.
Great. So we have a diverse panel here. So let's start with the question: what is climate resilience? How is it affecting us, and what are we doing about climate resilience?
Well, since I work for the City of Atlanta's Office of Resilience, I don't mind being the first to take a stab at that, especially because we work with the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, that we have to make sure that we bake that into all of the sustainability issues that we're tackling. And when we talk about resilience, we're not just talking about sustainability. I think people are very familiar with the term sustainability, especially with all the floods and fires and droughts and, everything going on. So we know what we need to do in terms of sustainability, but resilience really make sure that we're focused on resilience. And resilience is important because we know that a lot of the harm that has been done, especially to BIPOC communities, has to be addressed in order for us to make sure that we're bringing equality to all of our communities.
I'd like to say, in 2006, I was on the expert subject matter task force to write a regulatory building code platform for the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan in 2006. And that was by the United States Department of Trade Assistance in conjunction with ICC. And the whole point of the endeavor was to establish some kind of control over the construction because all of the money that was being spent in Iran and Afghanistan on construction, it was falling apart in 3 years. And there was no governing inspections that would protect the money. So the global financial networks and the International Monetary Fund insisted that they have a code platform. And that was that was my first exposure to sustainability and resiliency, because you spend good money after bad if you build it and then it falls down or doesn't work in 3 or 4 years.
I would like to add to what both of you have said, specifically Michelle. When I define resiliency, or where folks define resiliency, I think of people. If we do not ensure that our folks are able to thrive, especially with all of the environmental impacts we've all seen throughout the country this past summer, then they cannot be resilient, right? We tend to put buildings and infrastructure as coined as resiliency. If you don't have people, then you don't have a purpose to build roads. You don't have purpose to update buildings. So when we think about resiliency, I really want us to really focus on people and what it truly means for them to thrive as they face impact, diverse disparities, and especially BIPOC communities who we all know carry the burdens of environmental issues throughout the country. So super important as our cities, as we're here today having these conversations, that we always center community as a way for us to make policies and make implementation that is the betterment for them.
Yes, I completely agree. So what climate resilience means to me is preparedness. And that does associate with our community. It does associate with people. So even if you're looking at that infrastructure, those impacts, if we prepare them and we mitigate against that, then we can assist them. It makes it more better. And for the city of Birmingham, what we're experiencing is a lot of flooding. We've experienced major wind events. So there's not a lot of money out there for us to fix anything. So what's the best part for us is to educate our community, to let them understand what preparedness is, what they can do. So that's very important for us.
Yeah.
I'd like to pick up on that. We recognize that those neighborhoods that are low and very low income have been lagging in modernization and infrastructure because they have no voice. I think that we're entering a time with the infrastructure bill that they no longer be forgotten as far as their needs are concerned regarding housing and transportation and recreation, arts, and public housing, speaking to the equity of the situation.
Yeah, and I wanted to go there next, Eric. That's a great point. So we know that communities of lower social and economic backgrounds are suffering more. We see that they're at the forefront of a lot of climate change, right? So what do you guys see? How can we support those communities? How are we supporting those communities? What are we seeing in the future that's going to see climate resilience in those communities?
Well, I think you hit it on the head when you talked about educating people. Because I think until we realize, I know just for myself, I read a book that kind of changed my thought, which was The Color of Law by Richard Rothstein. And if you all are in planning or in city government and you haven't read The Color of Law, I would suggest even the Cliff Note part, because what it talked about was how strategically these communities have been built in terms of the how the freeways are going through communities, how landfills end up in communities. So because they were intentionally built, then we have to be intentional about dismantling and recreating and reimagining our communities. So that means that we have to make sure that we have fresh food access, that we have reliable transportation so people can get to work, so that we have clean energy for everybody. And because it impacts those at the lowest the most, if we focus on that and help people understand that, then it raises everyone.
I agree. I'm a planner by nature, so for me, I try to plan for those people who can't speak, so who don't understand that terminology. I look for solutions on how they can address some of the issues with climate resilience, with the incidents that's occurring to us, with the infrastructure. What we see in City of Birmingham is that our frequent hotspot areas, so the frequency of flooding, that property damage of these low socioeconomic areas, they don't understand. They don't have insurance. They can't get flood insurance. That's not an education component that I can say to them. They're living on a fixed income. I mean, these are things that we have to take into account. So for us, we try to do that mitigating factor. We look at if it's a rain event, we know these particular areas were hotspot areas. We know, most of our people in these areas were impacted. So we try to create some type of maintenance, or let's hurry up and go out and address these things so it will mitigate whatever damage that is. Not everything, for us, I think we initially went out and everything was about, flood insurance, let these people know, get them that information. Everyone needs flood insurance, but that's not the case. It's very expensive. And most of our population is elderly in the areas that's being impacted the most. So we're having that as an issue, and we're trying to identify those solutions. So we look at other possible ways, but the education piece and the outreach component is very important for us.
And if I can add to that two things, I would say particularly that we need to stop working in silos. So it's super important if we want communities to get involved that we have to work together collectively, and two, not waiting to address something when something bad happens. And we're all seeing the result of that in Jackson, Mississippi. And we want to make sure we include these communities in the very beginning of any planning stage, as you refer to, and making sure that they have a voice, that they know that, hey, I want my community to be better, but I don't necessarily have the time, so let's really accommodate them. Let's meet those folks where they're at. Maybe it's having meetings after working hours, right? Our working hours. Or maybe it's providing childcare so folks with children can attend meetings as well. So it's really about making sure folks have access, making sure we're no longer working in silos, and to not waiting until something bad happens for us to really say, oh my goodness, let's update our infrastructure.
And going off on the silo, right? You're talking about government being a silo from your community. You want to be able to communicate with them. What about government itself, right? We've got inspection services here. We've got commissioner. We've got different aspects of government. How are you guys communicating with each other? How are you guys communicating with your engineer, designer, architect? Can you speak a little bit to that?
Well, there has to be multi-level collaboration and cooperation if we're to make any difference at all. From the inspections viewpoint, there's got to be those that decides what jobs, who decides what money goes where, who's going to bear the impact of the environment, environmental impact of the money being spent. All of those things is part of a silo or a part of the multi-level cooperation. When it comes down to inspections, you're talking about the boots on the ground here to implement the processes and the planning that has been done before the ground is being broken. And so we're dedicated, the inspection that is dedicated to be a part and be that field team that's going to make sure that whatever's decided in the upper management, I guess, or government, like you're saying, you know, it's like when you say government is so amorphous, you're trying to say, what are we talking about? The CEO, the president, the director of your department, some panel or something. So those things got to be set up so that the policies can be implemented and that can be carried on later on when it comes to actual construction and meeting the goals that has been set out in the first place.
Oh, yes. I guess my situation is a little bit more unique. So I am a deputy director for planning, engineering, and permits. So the area that I supervise is the watershed, the planning, your hazard mitigation services. A part of my department, you have the building inspection side. So I have a deputy that I communicate, and we're under that same umbrella. So those things that I need to communicate to them, it's easy, you know, but the issue is this. So when you have those dollars in place, you have that, you know, your mayor or your commission or your city council, they have to identify those projects. So they have to look at it. So what we may deem as extremely important that you need to, you know, go after immediate, there may be something else that affects the city. So we look at it, so we try to leverage dollars. We try to look at any possible way. And like I said, I'm a preparedness person, I'm a hazard mitigation person. I'm passionate about hazard mitigation, and I'm very passionate about outreach. So I get outside and I go talk to people and I do exactly whatever I can do. But to the expectation that your city government can address all of that, it's not true. So what we are encountering is, how do we as our department heads or our deputies, how do we go out and communicate that to our community? How do we, you know, we trying to let them know you do matter, you know, but there are other competing interests that's here. So that's what we're encountering in the city of Birmingham.
And to piggyback on what Tracy said about, you know, working together, and the original question about, you know, working in silos, and we're being very intentional And that's why we're very thankful to have our new mayor, Andre Dickens, because he believes in working in circles. And he always said, moving Atlanta forward together. And that's like to your point, it's not just the city employees that are responsible to move Atlanta forward, it's everyone. And it's also important for us to work with our Department of Housing, our Department of Planning, our, all of these other things, because something that I just realized in you doing code enforcement or zoning, what I recently found out that I didn't realize is that sometimes, especially now that Atlanta is being gentrified, is that we understand that either investors or neighbors would use calling code enforcement as a weapon to remove legacy or make people nervous. So if you have legacy residents that have been in those homes, and yeah, there's an old car or truck that has been out there, but if they keep getting calls from code enforcement, or if that hole in the roof hasn't been repaired and they're getting water or something, then they're using that as a weapon and calling code enforcement to make that resident feel like their home does not have as much value, which leaves them open to the risk and of investors. So we have to work together to help understand that. So instead of making it a call for code enforcement, maybe we can call Rebuilding Atlanta together and help that resident to make sure that they're, getting the home repaired, as opposed to getting calls from investors to purchase their property.
Or code enforcement referring particular problematic areas to another agency that we may have that can help them, as opposed to finding them and eventually taking their property, I guess is what you're talking about, right?
Exactly, not being punitive, but being cooperative and helpful.
Yes.
Another point I had here, the National Institute of Building Sciences mentioned that every dollar spent on hazard mitigation can save the U.S. $6 from future disasters. So I want to talk a little bit about cost, and we know some bills that were passed recently that include sustainability, climate resilience. So talk a little bit about that. What do you see in these bills? How is it helping us fight climate change?
First and foremost, there we go. I think these dollars will definitely help with outreach, putting boots on the ground, because all of us here are not only making sure that our departments are being ran correctly, but we can't be everywhere every day. So making sure we're hiring folks and increasing our capacity to reach people who don't necessarily can be reached on a regular basis, spending money on outreach materials, making sure that folks have information translated in their native tongues, or if their language is, if English is their second language. Also using that opportunity to upgrade facilities in the community. I know for us, we're using our dollars to upgrade our fire station. To making it not only LEED certified, but also making a portion of it will assist with activities for our elderly, like a community center where we'll have programming for them and they can come out and eventually teach folks how to be more sustainable, educating them on ways for them to save energy, and because our vulnerable population is the elderly. So we saw it as a learning aspect, and as well as being able to upgrade our facilities in the community.
And Atlanta actually has a green infrastructure bond that they use to reduce flooding in specific areas, which goes back to your point about making sure that these areas not only are not flooded, but then these people aren't dealing with the shocks and stressors that come from flooding events.
And there's two approaches to that. One is from the builder's point of view, where there is an energy code, International Energy Efficiency Code from the ICC that the state has adopted, that deals with a lot of energy measures, and also calls for commissioning of buildings and insulation and air leakage and those kind of things like that. That's on new buildings, but there's a matter of retrofit of some of the older properties that can help cut down on utility bills too. That's part of the energy code that is rife for more exploration.
For the city of Birmingham, what we are looking at, the infrastructure dollars, yes, they will help. But like I said, you still have a community, a city, and you cannot, there's not one particular section that can, all your dollars are diverted to. So we are always looking at other opportunities. We're always looking at other grant funding. The city of Birmingham, we are a part of the National Flood Insurance Program. We're a CRS, a community rating system community, and we are at a 5, so that gives our residents, you know, a certain percentage off. So we try to do those additional measures to do that, but we go after grant dollars. We look, you know, how, you know, let's look at this holistically. You know, how do we address, here are our areas that we're having issues are, here, this is what's affecting, and how do we address that in a strategic plan? So we look at it strategically, and then we look at other funding. We're not just solely depending on, our department is not solely depending on those infrastructure dollars, because we realize there's other things that the city needs or our citizens needs to be addressed by those dollars. So we are looking at flood mitigation grants, brick grants, dealing with, you know, air quality, water quality, and quantity. So we look at all of that. So we just trying to leverage the dollars so that we can assist our citizens and not just solely deal with the infrastructure dollars. Because that's when they hear that, oh, it's infrastructure money. Okay, so my issue is going to be addressed. And that's not the reality. I mean, we really need to communicate and be truthful to our residents. We don't need them to think that. So if it's not something that's gonna happen, we need to tell them, you might not see it here, but this is the way we're gonna go. We're gonna try to do a mitigation, you know, effort here. We're gonna try to repair and replace here. It's a little difficult for us because what's happening, and I'm sure it's happening across the country, is that there's frequent rain events. Our infrastructure, we got multiple businesses going up, sea of pavement, and you get extensive runoff. So that's what's creating our flooding issues. So we have to look at that and do an asset, a maintenance, create some type of maintenance plan so we can address that. But we have to do it strategically, and we can't just solely depend on the infrastructure dollars.
You had mentioned the NFIP, the National Flood Insurance Program, and it's the insurance businesses that controls that. And that's one of the mechanisms for enforcement of these kinds of mitigation efforts. Insurance can't let something be destroyed and then pay it off and then have it built back like it was and then it be destroyed again. So they call the shots on a lot of the structures that are in place now that Tracy is mentioning that maybe wasn't in a flood area before, but because of the 100-year event, now it is, and now the insurance is saying like, well, before you build it back, you got to put it on, elevate the structure, or put it on stilts, or have some other kind of mitigation before we'll insure it. And you can't get a loan without insurance, so there you go. There's part of that is the enforcement of climate resiliency and change that's going to take in place.
Yeah, so you mentioned some of the enforcement and regulations that we have that help climate resilience. A lot of that is changing, right? A lot of those things are being added, right? Is there anything you've seen recently that inspires you in your city, and maybe that's something that you guys are pushing for yourself, where you can add some of these specific regulations that will help you become more resilient?
Well, Tracy, you're dealing with the Safe Room program, aren't you?
Yeah, so we have went after funding for community safe rooms, but we also have, what we're seeing right now, like our priority is going after those flood mitigation dollars, going after, maybe project scoping. We were awarded a BRIC grant for project scoping for them to look at all of our issues, all of our information, all of our data to help us create some strategic plan on how we're addressing our flooding issues. So that's like super major to us. The community safe room in 2011, when we had the tornado that hit us, I served as the project manager on the wind event. In the city of Birmingham, we went after about 20, 25 grants. We didn't get them all, but we went after them. But because the other municipalities around us did not, take that aggressiveness approach that we did, but we were trying to get all the dollars. So for me, like I said, I'm hazard mitigation. Anytime something happens, I'm looking for those federal dollars to open up, and I'm trying to see how I can, leverage or get to it, or what we can do to help our citizens. So the program with that, but I think for us right now, we are still, we're about to construct a new community safe room. We have a total of six. But we're focusing more on our flood mitigation issues. We're trying to mitigate that because we have a lot of people that's being impacted, and they can't afford it. They can't afford their car gets flooded every 2 to 3 days, every time it rains. They can't afford the water is getting into their house. They can't afford it because a lot of times flood insurance are for those people who live in the floodplain. These people don't live in a floodplain. They live in a regular area. It's just that frequent event, they're getting flooded. So that's what we're focusing on.
Something that I've been working really diligently on in the city of Coral Springs is making sure that environmental issues and sustainability is a topic of interest. So prior to me joining the commission, we did not have a sustainability office, nor did we have a sustainability manager. So that is something that I advocated for and continue to say why we need it, because it is super important for our communities. So with that being said, through the sustainability office and our great manager, we've been able to create a sustainability action plan. And through that action plan, we are able to look at people, we're looking at operations, and we're looking at environmental impacts and how all of those work together. Water. Oh. And so with that being said, that is something that I've been working really hard on. Lastly, making sure that our community is really divesting from fossil fuels. So we've just entered the Race to Zero initiative that the UN has been pushing, and making sure that we are meeting net zero by 2050. I was pushing for 2030, but that was me being optimistic. But it's something that we can do, especially being that our community is ground zero for climate change. Although we are in the suburbs, we're not a coastal city, we do face the Everglades, and the Everglades is our line of protection, and every year we're losing bits and pieces of it. And for those who don't know, the Everglades serves as a filtration system, and also as a place to ensure that helps with flooding, because it absorbs water, and it also ensures that it keeps our ecosystem clean. So if we don't have any Everglades, then what's going to happen to our communities? So making sure that our sustainability action plan addresses that, but also allows us to live in a community that, one, we can thrive, in a community that we're proud of. We all love to entertain, we love to go out, but we want to make sure our city is a walkable city. We want to make sure that the things that we enjoy, we could still do that, but continue to be environmentally friendly. So with our sustainability manager, I hope to see more changes like this, and making sure that we continue to divest from fossil fuels.
Yeah, and let's see what else. If you guys don't mind talking, so you talked a little bit, we said climate resilience, climate change is getting worse, right? So now climate resilience is becoming more of a topic in the conversation. where are you getting information from? Where are you learning? Who are you speaking with to learn about climate resilience, and what's the newest thing that people are doing?
Well, I just made 3 new best friends right here. And I was here this morning and met with someone else because it is definitely, we are not going to get out of this climate crisis alone. We all have to collectively work together. That means collaborating. That means talking to our mayors or our commissioners from other states, other cities. We are part of other networks, the USSDN. We're part of the Natural Resource Defense Council that helps with a lot of our projects. We're working with other cities like Atlanta Metro. I just got off the phone literally 5 minutes ago having a conversation about why we're not all networking together. And you talked about working in silos. We have to get out of that mindset of competition and get into the mindset of collaboration.
And and speaking of the building codes, they're renewed every 3 years. And during that cycle, there's input that goes in for the next cycle. And a lot of the environmental impacts and climate resiliency things are going into all 4 codes: electrical, mechanical, plumbing, building, fire sprinkler. They're all updated, ADA. They're all updated every 3 years. So that's the mechanism that these mitigation measures can be placed in and be part of the building code that we know that can be enforced as a result.
I would say I tap into networks like this. This is a great opportunity for us to learn. I've learned a lot today, especially those agendas had so much background information. I was like, oh, I didn't know that. Learned from the presentations. So continuing to attend convenings like this is super important. I know we were in a hiatus with COVID and we didn't have face-to-face interaction. So in convenings like this is super important. We're sharing ideas, we're becoming thought partners, we're basically sharing what we're doing in our cities and taking that back. And I've learned a few things today that I will be taking back to my city and making sure that my sustainability manager is implementing. So attending convenings like this, really being abreast on local news, on what's going around the nation and what not to do because things are happening there, and making sure that our infrastructure is updated so we don't deal with what's going on in the rest of the country.
Yeah, with that, I'd like to not close it off, but maybe as a last remark from you guys, I'd love to hear some of your projects that you're implementing towards climate resilience. It's something that we're doing that's already helping us fight the climate change that's happening.
We have a Village Creek Greenway project that we're initiating right now. It is on previous bought out land, so we're doing that. Also, we had partnered with the Corps of Engineers in the city of Bessemer to look at a flood control project. So it's reducing that. So we're in the beginning stages of that. And right now we're just doing an asset database, just looking at what we have so we can just, look at some other projects and strategically go after those dollars for them.
One project that I'm very proud of is our city is finally going to get a downtown. We haven't had a downtown. It's a small suburb, not so small, but a suburb, and want to make sure that we are doing it the right way. And not building in a way that's not sustainable, and that is we're going to pay for it 10 to 15 years later. So this is an opportunity to have net zero buildings, to have green spaces, to make it a walkable city that we're seeing this trend throughout the country. So that is one project that I'm very invested in with our CRA. One other project that I'm super involved in is our Neighborhood Environmental Committee, really recruiting young people into this committee, making sure that they have a voice because they are essentially going to be carrying the torch as well as living the consequences of what we're doing to the earth today. So making sure that that legacy lives on through them and continue pushing them to be environmental stewards. Lastly, in my day job, because I'm a commissioner, but that's a part-time job, full-time commitment, but that's another conversation. I am making sure that I am connecting the dots with community members and making sure that folks understand how climate change and the impacts impact their day-to-day lives. Sometimes people feel like it's untouchable, like, oh, that's just whatever. I don't have time to think about that. But I'm there trying to relate climate change impacts your utilities, it impacts their food, it impacts your public housing, it impacts everything, public transportation. So it's my job to really connect those dots, and I look forward to ensuring that my communities can thrive for years to come.
Awesome, because I'm doing something very similar. We have the Sustainability Ambassador course that we do twice a year to just bring residents in and talk about the pillars of sustainability to help them understand how we all play a role in that. And also the city of Atlanta has a goal for all of our buildings to be by 2035 to be on totally renewable energy. So we're putting solar panels everywhere. We're doing a lot to make sure that our buildings are as clean as possible in terms of environment. One of the other passions that I really have is around food access, to make sure we have a goal to have for 85% of our residents to have access to fresh food. But that is not only through urban farms, but through recovery, because we have to be aware that 40% of the food that's consumed, that is produced in this country, is not even consumed. So food waste is such a big emitter of CO2 that they say that if food were a country, it would be the third largest emitter of carbon in the world. So you'd have China, United States, food waste. So that's food that could be going back to people in our communities. That's producing compost. And once we produce compost, then we have less runoff, because the soil that we need that absorbs the moisture. So, and then we grow new food. So that's just understanding how the cycle is important all the way around.
Yeah, I like that. You've heard the city of Atlanta talk about their innovations all day long, I think. When it comes to solar, like Michelle was talking about, then there's permits that are required for that. When it comes to EV chargers, there's permits that are required for that. There's a permit required for just about everything that you do, really. And so the key to Atlanta is to have a smart building department, to have an adaptable building department, have a reactive building department. And that comes from the very beginning of the Development Review Committee to zoning and plan review, that makes sure that the items that are important for climate resilience and sustainability are incorporated into the approved plans. And that process should not be like pulling teeth. It should be a smooth kind of operation, and we're working to make that as smooth as possible to get through our plan review, our permitting, and when it comes to inspections, then customer service is really our bailiwick, as far as our director, Greg Pace, has set the stage on. Is no more where the building inspector can be like cavalier or obscure or just plain mean. So we try to make it happen and get to the yes whenever we can.
So it can't be an afterthought like the climate change or resilience or sustainability can't, after the building is designed. No,
Right.
we have to put it in, in the foundation.
Put it in the mix.
Great. So we'll open it up to any questions that the audience may have.
Thank you very much.
Yeah? Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so do you guys want to add anything to, rise in sea level, or some of the things that he mentioned and how climate resilience is responding to it?
Yeah, I mean, he mentioned the emergency management piece. He mentioned the respond and recovery, and that is a part of climate resilience. How do you respond and recover and mitigate when inclement weather hits or you have some disaster, natural disaster that occurs? So, yeah, it's very important. And, like I said, that is what we look at every day. We look at preparedness because we don't have the dollars all the time, but we are able to prepare, and that's the resilience in how we plan.
Yeah, you said a lot. And what resonated with me was sea level rise. I live in Florida. Florida is directly impacted by sea level rise. And what we're seeing is a huge surge of displacement of areas where were once desirable, oceanfront, and then developers are coming inland and displacing people who have lived there for years, and really just changing the dynamics and the culture of one particular area. So what I want all the cities in here, or all electeds or folks who are working in government, is to really start implementing displacement plans, and how are we going to be able to ensure that people are going to be living, especially in close corridors, because that is going to be the next issue. We are seeing it, droves of people moving, and we just don't have a capacity for them. We have a housing crisis, we're having stresses on our water quality, and the list goes on. And so that is, I see now, is a direct impact on resiliency.
So we really need to take the lessons that we've learned from these past 2 years and build these cities of the future. Because what we've had in these past 2 years has showed us several things. First of all, it has showed us that we don't have to get into a car and drive into a building to do work. So what are we going to do with all of these empty buildings and these people that are living on the street? Can we somehow reimagine? I think that's what resiliency really is going to have to take, is for us to reimagine, to rethink, to adjust our thoughts and open our minds and work together with what we have to develop solutions that are just best for the people. Forget, I can't say that. Forget the money. We just need to focus on the people.
Well, the issues that you have spoken to, from my point of view, there's an energy code, like I had said before. So the main purpose is to make sure that they're meeting the full intent of the energy code regarding, like you said, longer seasons and air conditioning, so that the house can perform at an efficient level. So my input is to make sure that our inspectors are good and efficient and know what they're doing and can call these things so that the house can function like it's supposed to function. So that's the best I can say about some of the things that you were mentioning.
Great. I think with that, we're pretty much done. Yeah? Well, thanks to the panelists. Appreciate your time.